is always one step ahead of me. That is like the truth, always one step ahead of me. So I would like to bring the meeting officially to begin. Welcome, welcome everyone. It really is great to see you all. We have an incredibly great program today, as usual. I think all of I sat in on the programs meeting today and was mostly a listener as I was driving my car, but between that meeting and I've recently attended World Community Services, and I have to say I am always so moved and inspired by the incredible work that happens in these committees and by the talent of the Rotarians that are on those committees. This club is doing great work and it's exciting to be a part of it. So welcome to the meeting today. Great to have you. And if you will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our inspirational moment today will be by RJ Ross. RJ is an incoming club board of director. RJ is also a past club president, and he's a retired president of Samaritan Institute. So I will turn the floor over to you, RJ. And RJ, you'll have to take yourself off mute. Oops, not yet. Can't hear you, RJ. Oh, there you go. There we go.
All right, we've got it.
Yeah, got it.
For today's inspirational message, I've decided to highlight Rotary's leadership history of developing nonprofit organizations. Here is how Dr. Peter Drucker, the father of management, described nonprofit. He said, when I first began to work with nonprofit institutions, they were generally seen as marginal to an American society dominated by big business and government. We now realize that the nonprofit work of healthcare, education, religion, and other organizations is central to the quality of life America. It's central to citizenship and indeed carries the values of American society. In fact, nonprofits may be Americans' most important export to the rest of the world. Nonprofits do something vastly different from business and government. Business offers goods and services, government controls. Nonprofit product is to change human beings. Rotary identified this role dating back to its founding using the tagline, service above self. And in 1910, it celebrated the first international convention in Chicago, expanding the service above self challenge throughout the world. Today, there are literally thousands, if not millions, of nonprofit organizations whose development have Rotarian fingerprints all over their beginning. Programs like our youth services, healthcare, rural community service have enabled the Denver Club to change human beings and sometimes save lives. Let's keep up the good work.
Very good. Thank you so much, RJ. Okay. Next is our club secretary report. Troy Szymanski, who is our secretary. Troy is also our partner and fund manager with Outpost Fund. So Troy.
Thank you very much, President Debbie. I want to start off and welcoming everybody to the meeting today. Want to recognize our guests that are joining. We have Chris Beasley, a guest of President Debbie Beasley. We also have Jan, Susan, Taishin, and Yuji Zhang. Thank you all for joining, as well as potential new members, Jeremy Stern, Don Abbott, and Gideon Hod. Thank you all for joining. We hope you enjoy the program as much as I normally do. Some birthdays for this week, so join me in wishing Chris Rose, Brian Geis, Rick Bowman, Harry Ellison, and Roland Thornton happy birthdays this week. So send them a message. Happy birthday from Denver Rotary to all of you. And then finally, some announcements, very brief. In Rotary-related announcements, we have just that next Wednesday, we will have our normal Rotary Zoom happy hour at 5:30. Keep an eye out in the Tuesday email blast that should have a link to that if you'd like to join and share about an hour-long discussion with some of your Rotary friends. And then in other unrelated news to Rotary, if you didn't know it, short-sleeved hoodies are incredibly comfortable. And normally I would wear something a little bit more formal for this meeting, but it is too comfortable for me to not wear. So if you didn't know this, now you do. That's all from me, President Debbie. Back to you.
You know, Troy always teaches me new things like short sleeve hoodies, and it's cool to eat while you're on these meetings. So can't remember the wording, but it's something like that. All right, let's see. John Stewart, are you on the line? I'm looking for you. I will turn it over to John.
I'm not muted anymore, right?
Okay, no, you're not. Let me introduce you first, and I have a little bit of a lead-in for you. So I think as many of you know, if you've heard me once, you've probably heard me a dozen times say that we are one great club and two great foundations. So the red bucket today will go to the Rotary Foundation. As a proud contributor to both foundations, it's the question that comes to me the most is it helps to provide explanation or real life examples of where your dollars go for the Rotary Foundation. So just today, I got an email from the Rotary Foundation that talked about, and I'll just read you a couple sentences before I turn it over to John. But gifts like ours that go to the Rotary Foundation provide people with clean water, a basic necessity for a healthy environment and productive lives. Residents in parts of Nigeria now have access to safe water thanks to a project funded by a grant from the Rotary Foundation. Our global grants bring sustainable change to communities worldwide by funding water, sanitation, and hygiene projects. In their email, what I think is just so impactful, it says a gift of just $24 can provide one person with clean water for life. So that's a real live example of how dollars go to work through the Rotary Foundation, what our great World Community Services Committee does, and in partnership with our Denver Rotary Club Foundation. So with that, I would like to introduce John Stewart. John is an incoming DRCF Denver Rotary Club Foundation trustee. He's also on the Rotary Foundation Committee. So he is another living, breathing example of being very involved in both foundations. And John is also an attorney sole practitioner. So I turn it over to you, John.
John,
Okay,
we can't see you. We can't see you.
I reached up to adjust my screen, and something called a leader in 2020 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Meeting Solutions popped up. Does anybody know how I think maybe I can click over here.
We can see the top of your head, John. Just
Okay. And I just rejoined the meeting, and I'm going to click open meetings. Okay, I see you, Peg. Does everybody see me?
We see the top of your head, like Peg says. Can you move your
Okay, I'm
camera
going to
down?
adjust the screen again and hope I don't get that
Perfect.
other thing.
There, a little bit
Okay,
more.
excellent.
Oh, you look great.
Okay, well, good afternoon, Rotarians. Thank you, President Debbie, for your great description of what the Rotary Foundation does for our international projects. Our club has several international projects, too many to mention here, and clean water is a good example. And it's been my pleasure to be on the World Community Service ever since I joined in '99. They do great work. We want to hear your good news, and I'm going to lead off. This is almost old news now, but more than 2 weeks ago, we had a wonderful family reunion of sorts up in the mountains where we dared go to Edwards, Colorado, where relatives of my wife had been skiing Beaver Creek, and we had a nice masked dinner at a wonderful restaurant that served terrific elk steaks, and a good chance to see our family in the middle of the epidemic. And so that's worth $20 to me. And for the rest of you, you can raise your hands through the participants label on the bar below. Is that correct? And I get to see who you are and call on you, and you get to give your good news.
See Matt.
John, I see that
Okay.
Andre Van Hall has his hand up.
Andre Van Hall.
Well, hi, everybody. And I just heard from Guide Dogs for the Blind that they have selected a dog that is probably going to be my partner, and they're going to fly a trainer out on March 1st to come to Colorado and spend 9 days training me with a new dog. I think it's going to work out. It's still a little bit of doubt if the dog is going to graduate or not, but I'm very, very excited.
Very good. Matt Isola.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day. My good news is that Generation Exchange, after a 9-month hiatus, has resumed online workshops, which is very exciting. And if any of you need any tech help, please reach out, contact me. We've got a couple options for you. There's a Generation Exchange workshop this Saturday. And we're also doing a Generation Exchange happy hour. Anyone who's came in the past, you're welcome to join us, similar to the Rotary happy hour that we have, just a kind of non-technology related community building event. So you know me, if you need tech help or you're interested in hanging out with us, shoot me an email.
And I will also join you in that good news.
That is exciting, very exciting. Anyone else? I am looking.
I don't see anyone.
Don't see anyone.
All right.
And then, if I have this corrected, they go to the after the meeting survey. We'll have a place to make the donation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, very good.
All right. We are a little
of those relations is more important. The United States has relationships. The speaker today is a very distinguished colleague of mine who chairs and has been leading our US-China Center cooperation with US-China Cooperation Center. He's a visionary, he's a scholar, he's a respected teacher, and an expert analyst. And I think you have seen his accomplishments as you read in the keyway, because they are numerous. Universities, books, editorships, and all I wish to add is that he is an amazing human being who has earned the respect of not only his peers, not only his students, but those who consider themselves experts in the field, not simply in this country, but all around the world. My fellow Rotarians, I'm delighted, privileged, honored to present to you Sam Zhao, my good friend. Sam, it's yours. And unmute yourself, my friend. You are still mute.
Thank you, my dear friend, Professor Van Nanda. I still remember when I came to DU, you introduced all the new faculty members to the university. I was one of them. So you are my very, very respected colleague. And also I'm very honored to be part of this group to make my presentation to this very distinguished group of business leaders in Denver. And the topic I'm going to discuss is the China challenge to the global order. Oh, let me get my. Okay, so the topic I'm going to discuss today is the China challenge to the global order. In order to talk about this subject, let's to start from a conceptualization of the world order. What is world order? Third point here is that great powers have been the rule makers and to confine, to align this order to their interests and values. And the small and weak states are very often just rule takers without choices. And emerging powers are often the challengers. The current world order has been constructed under US leadership after World War II. And China is rising as a global power. Therefore, there are three questions has been raised in regarding to the China's rise. First, is China content to preserve or discontented to overhaul the post-World War II order? Second, is China rising to challenge the US-led or US contracted world order? Third, is China ready to replace the US net order with a China-centric order? And these questions, I think, are very important as introduced because China has a very fundamentally different value system and also political system. And another very important point at this time talking about this topic is that the US-led order is crumbling, especially during the Trump administration. Now Joe Biden has come, we have to see what's going the next. On these challenges, there are different answers. Scholars don't have a consensus how to answer these questions. And I summarized three different positions. First, I call that liberal view, which has argued that the post-World War II order is open and rules-based and non-discrimination. So that has created conditions for China to advance its expanded economic, political, even strategic interests in the order. Plus, the liberal globalization has created some common stakes for China to the liberal order. In fact, the China interest would constrain China's behavior in that case. The second view I summarize is what I call alarmist view, which is that China is discontented to the liberal order and has attempted to fill the vacuum left by US, especially during the Trump administration, and to reconstruct a Sino-centric authoritarian order. In that case, the liberal rules, norms of the current international order is threatened. The third view is what I call wait and see view, which argue that the alarmists are overblown, at least for now. A Sino-centric world order is not achievable. And China has only exploited tactically the vacuum left by the US. In fact, each of these arguments, I have scholarly literature to back them up. The third view, in fact, is a former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd just wrote on that article. So I don't know, how do you think of these three positions? What I have seen is that the liberal position has basically lost its ground. And the alarmist view has gained ground in this process, especially in the last several years in light of China's aggressive behavior. But most scholars, including myself, have continued to hold the so-called wait and see position. Let me elaborate this position because it's also my personal position. To start, let's define the post-World War II order. It has composed primarily a UN charter on a UN charter system, which is hybrid system. On the one hand, which is a liberal, is a liberal. It's very conventional. That is based upon so-called Westphalian principles of state sovereignty and diplomatic equality, this type of conventional ideas. But on the other hand, you can see also, we see the UN has been built upon so-called globalist aspirations, try to look beyond territorially bounded nation state system. Beyond the UN charter system, we also see a US-led interstate alliance system, such as NATO, OECD, those kind of system. In that case, how do you think the China would see this international order created on the US desirable or undesirable? The question becomes, is China a revolutionary state or a stakeholder or a revisionist state? In fact, in my own research, I see the China's position attitudes toward the current international system has been evolving. After the founding of PRC, China was definitely a revolutionary state because China was excluded from the UN system. China wanted to overthrow the UN system. And then after 1971, after China entered the UN, China gradually became a stakeholder. And because China benefited from and prospered because of the participation in the order. However, a rising China in the last several decades, especially in the recent decades, has become what I call revisionist power and regarded the U.S. net order, especially U.S. dominance in the order, unfair and unreasonable to reflect the interests and value of emerging powers like China, and want to reform the global governance, including the global order. Then what are the Chinese complaints about current order? I see three aspects. First, the post-World War II order was created in the context of American predominance to conforming American values and projecting American power. China has been an outlier because China is not a democracy. Second, the Chinese has complained that US promotion of liberal values have not produced positive results globally. In fact, responsible for conflicts and chaos worldwide. In fact, has generated some of those kind of anti-liberal, anti-American sentiments in third world countries. Third, the US has a double standard in the compliance with the rules and norms, the world order. In fact, US has built the rules, these international norms, to guide actions of other states and resisted submitting to the rules. It hopes others would comply. But by others, there's so many examples. Let me give you some examples. Chinese
May I
complain.
interrupt for just a second? Did you intend to advance your slides? We've had a couple questions about that. We see your introduction slides. Okay.
Not yet.
All right, just checking. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
So we are talking about the third point here. And so one example here, Chinese scholars have cited often is that Washington has claimed that UN clause, UN Convention for the Law of the Sea is part of customary international law. And US has conducted so-called freedom of navigation in South China Sea. However, the US Congress has never ratified UN clause. So Washington has insisted others to obey the treaty rules that the US has refused to accept. There are other examples, the Iraq war, those kind of using force supposed to be authorized by the UN Security Council, but there's a coalition of willings, not by the UN authorization, which created a lot of chaos. So in that case, China has become a challenger to the US net order. The challenges have come from three aspects from China's side. First, President Xi Jinping, Chinese leader, has proposed China's vision for the future of the order, which is known as the community of shared future for mankind. This is many people just dismiss that as a slogan, but we have some very important meanings there. The most essential meaning for me is that it rejects Western values as universal and calls for all social political systems to be respected as equally valid. Democracies are not a model superior to authoritarianism. All should peacefully exist. In other words, not attempt to transform the others. So that's the thing this concept is. Second, China has challenged the US dominance in the global institutions and demanded greater voices and representation in the UN system, especially. For example, China has in the IMF, China proposed Renmin to be included as basket of international currency for the special drawing rights during the financial crisis 2009, and which has been accepted. China also increased its voting share in the IMF. The most important for me is that China has sent its best diplomats to compete for the leadership positions in the UN special agencies, in the whole UN system, in fact. For example, now, today, at this moment, we see 15 special agencies, specialized agencies, UN, China has 4 positions. I mean, 4 positions are held by the Chinese diplomats, Chinese nationals. Let me give you the Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Telecommunication Union, the UN Industrial Development Organization, and the International Civil Aviation Organization, these kind of organizations. These leadership positions have helped advance China's economic interests, but more importantly, has advanced China's political ends. For example, on the Taiwan issue, all those organizations headed by Chinese, they have rejected Taiwan even as an observer position. WHO and the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, which is universally for the aviation safety and public health. But Taiwan could not even get an observer's position because of China's insists and China's influence in those organizations. And outside these organizations, this kind of UN system, China has also launched Beijing-led, China-inspired international institutions to influence its global influence and rule-making power. For example, China launched the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Central Asia, in Asia, very powerful. The new development bank of the BRIC countries of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which is headquartered in Shanghai. And also the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, headquartered in Beijing and headed by a Chinese national. The third aspect of China's challenge is China has tried to rewrite the rules, norms, the world order in what I call a statist image that leaves ample leeway for the state to conduct themselves as they please. Here, the emphasis is state sovereignty and consent in international affairs. For example, China demanded 2 essential preconditions for UN peacekeeping operations, which China has contributed hugely. One is endorsement by the UN Security Council. The second is consent by the government of the host countries. Otherwise, China will not support. This China principle, for many years, China was on the defensive side of its statist values. But China has become increasingly aggressive in asserting its statist values in global governance. For example, in the frontier governance issues, cyberspace governance, the US has proposed multi-stakeholder model, which is private society and corporations and government working together. China has proposed what they call cyber sovereignty. The state patrols the cyber borders, just like the patrols territorial borders. Some scholars even talk about China has built a system of cyber totalitarianism. The World Wide Web is not worldwide, it's localized in China. And also China has tried to promote reshape the norms of international human rights governance. They advocate the development rights are more fundamental than individual civil rights in developing countries. In fact, China's position has been supported by many developing countries because those leaders in those countries have believed that eradication of poverty, in other words, development, rather than individual rights, are more fundamental for those countries. All those sources of the problems came from poverty, not from civil rights. So China now is the de facto leader of a bloc of authoritarian or developing countries in the UN Human Rights Council, and often put the Western democracies in a voting minority. And China's position, for example, in the UN Human Rights Council has been enhanced dramatically after Trump withdrew US from the Council 2018. Although now US tried to return, but only as an observer, Joe Biden administration. For example, last year, July, 27 countries supported UK led joint statement, which criticized China action in Xinjiang, Uyghurs area, and in Hong Kong. But 46 countries dismissed criticism regarding Xinjiang. 53 countries defend China's position in Hong Kong. So that's very amazing to China, to Western democracies. And China's position, this kind of status position, has gained a kind of momentum amid this COVID-19, because many countries, including the liberal democracies, have enhanced the state authorities to fight the virus. For example, while China was criticized for its contact tracing system to facilitate surveillance of their own citizens, but some democracies, especially those in Asia, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, they use surveillance technologies to track people's contacts with the virus. And some democracies have emulated China's state capitalism and adopt the so-called industrial policy, which I've been in this country for 30 years, more than 30 years, studying comparative politics, which always dismissed by the American political scientists. That's an Asian type, Japan, China. But US now has adopted those industrial policies. Trump imposed tariffs on China, which is totally illegal from WTO perspective, because state authorities in the national security grant. And the Biden administration has not been better on this. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we saw Joe Biden talking about Buy America. Direct today, I just read a news today. Joe Biden has ordered a review of American foreign supply chains to make sure the US is secure. In other words, will do a lot of redundant of supplies, which is not the free market system. And even more ironically, for me, is the US, especially the Trump administration, has adopted what's called cyber sovereignty by announcing sweeping clean network program to ban virtually all Chinese information technology companies such as TikTok, WeChat, those type. Although now I think Joe Biden may have a second thought. But now let's move to the final question here. Is China ready to replace the US network order with the Chinese order, although we see all those challenges? In order to answer this question, we have to look at three aspects. And does China have enough resources to provide sweeping global goods? Can China provide alternative values universally accepted? Third, is China still a beneficiary in the current order? My answer to this is here. Let's look at each of these questions very briefly, quickly. First, China is not in a position to provide sweeping global public goods because China is still a fragile, rising power. Although from outside, this kind of a very positive, very confident image, which covers a lot of internal problems in China. It's not clear if China could become the first authoritarian regime to avoid so-called mid-income trap that had kept many developing countries, emerging economies from becoming high income countries. And also China faced so many domestic external challenges, domestically environmental destruction, in that over capacity of industrial capacity, huge local government debts, and also now a big problem people talk a lot is aging population because of birth control in the early years. China has to pay a very high cost for those aging people for their cares. More important for me here is the political crisis in the future, because President Xi Jinping make himself a lifetime president, then would not have a succession arrangement. He would get old. He will get sick. He might die. That would be very chaotic for China at that stage. We see coup d'etat. Mao Zedong's death, that coup d'etat produced the next government. Is that something stable for China at this time? And also externally, China is facing a deteriorating environment because of those kind of China's assertive policies. So a lot of people have criticized China for so-called the overdraft, strategic overdraft. China has not been able to mobilize resources, or does not have those kind of resources itself. Chinese people have complained for those so-called public goods. I don't want to give examples because we don't have that much time. The second issue here is that Chinese leadership Chinese leaders have not articulated universally accepted alternative values. The vision Xi Jinping proposed as a community of shared future for mankind has often been confused with, in our field, we call Tianxia, a hierarchical system, all on the heaven order, which has been normally and practically at odds with modern diplomacy. So until China could develop a universally accepted value system in the 21st century, China misses one of the core features of global leadership to restructure the international order. Third, China still is a beneficiary of the order. I mean, as we talked earlier, China's become second largest economy today in the world because China has been part of this relatively liberal international system, international order, and benefited, maybe even as a free rider, arguably the largest beneficiary of the order. In the security front, China also benefits from the U.S. treaty system, alliance system, U.S. troops in the Western Pacific, in Asia Pacific as a whole. Think about that. If U.S. told Japan, bye, U.S. will not provide a so-called nuclear umbrella. Japan will develop nuclear weapons. If Japan develop nuclear weapons, South Korea would develop nuclear weapons. Many other countries would develop nuclear weapons. That would be a nightmare for China to see its surrounding neighborhood. China, in that case, if they try to overthrow this system, it's counterproductive to its own national interests. Finally, in conclusion, let me raise two questions for you to think. First, how should the US in this case, and also the international community, deal with China as a revisionist power? I don't know how do you answer this question. It's very, very important. In my own answer is that what I see China's revisionist demands, or Chinese will say reform demands, have focused primarily on obtaining the position rating with its rising power status, rather than to overthrow the order. They got more voices, more representations. So in that case, I think the international community at this time still can engage China and to put clear rules to bind China. Of course, U.S. should first to bind U.S. self, not set a bad example for China, for the whole world. And in that case, even to accommodate some of the China's legitimate aspirations. After all, when the post-World War II order was constructed, U.S. played leadership role because U.S. accounted for half of the world GDP. What is U.S. percentage today? Less than 25. U.S. was, China at that time was totally neglectable. Now China is about 15 to 20%. So this kind of shift of balance power should be reflected in the international order, or the rule-making capacity of the order. So I think Joe Biden, when he was a vice president, I was impressed in the last meeting, Obama administration with China as a strategic dialogue. He said, China, we should welcome China on the table to make rules. But we should also constrain China's adventurous actions. Second question here, I think is more subtle here, is that as China is not ready, as we talked about, to impress the global leadership or to reconstruct order led by China, and the US now is in big trouble. Although Joe Biden may reverse that, we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see. And so, are we coming to a world disorder? That's the question I have asked myself a lot. There are three answers to this very critical question. One is by a Harvard professor called Graham Allison. He has proposed the Thucydides trap. That is, a rising power versus incumbent power have come to an inevitable conflict, even war. The second answer is by a scholar also in Germany called the Hindenburg trap. In fact, Josef brought this to, also Harvard professor, brought this concept to China-U.S. relationship, talking about now, because the U.S. is not willing to pay or lead the global order, and China is not ready to do it. So the danger now is the short of supply of the global public goods. And that's also very dangerous for the world order, like the pandemic, like the climate change. All those kind of issues will not have a solution. Finally, the final answer to this question comes from Ian Bremmer, the Eurasia Group President Chairman. He used the term G0, jungle of unbounded power politics. The strong do whatever they can, and the weak will have to suffer whatever they must. So the world is moving to the direction which is uncertain. With these kind of looming questions, maybe I don't have good answers. Let me conclude my presentation and ready for some questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is Debbie. Thank you so much. I do have a number of questions that I asked to be sent directly to me. So let me start with the first, which came at the beginning of our program. Someone asked, there was recently found in a warehouse defective N95 masks that came from China, and also past occurrence of toys that were shipped to US that had lead in them, which was banned in US at the time. Can you comment on the supply chain and issues such as that?
Oh, yes. In fact, that was a part of my presentation talking about China as a global leader to provide so-called public goods. And China has what they call the mask diplomacy. After they controlled the pandemic in China, they have marked themselves as providing those masks and medical supplies as assistance to other countries in the pandemic. However, they are not. They are not public goods. They are, first of all, most of them, they sell for even very high price. Second, defectives and other problems. So that has become a problem between China and many countries in Europe. And also, I don't know if in US has that serious, but the mask diplomacy has caused a lot of problem for China's international image. And so that, I think that's an issue here. In terms of supply chain, China still holds the largest supplies of those equipments. And China has recovered from the pandemic early. So China has benefited from this dramatically. But the quality issue is a big issue. Now, what we are talking about so-called vaccine diplomacy. And all the people in China, they said the Chinese vaccines are better than the US and European ones. And we'll have to see, but, and also they said they are provide them as so-called public goods for free. And their competition, China competes with India, with the US, with the European countries. And the quality here is, we have to see.
The next question, if poverty is such a core concern of Chinese authorities, why does China tolerate North Korean poverty?
First of all, the Chinese poverty issue here. China, when I came to the US 36, almost 37 years ago, I'm very old now. And US was so advanced for me. Everything was developed. China was so poor. My salary, I was professor at the Peking University, top university, not Harvard University in this country. My salary was only about $10 a month. I came to US, everything, the highway, the skyscrapers, everything. But now China has, I think the biggest accomplishments, one of the biggest accomplishments of China has been eradicate this poverty, to lift millions of people out of poverty. Still have poverty issues in China. Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang last June, I mean that still 600 million Chinese people still lived upon 1,000 Chinese yuan. And that's about over 100 US dollars per month. And so China's issue itself is still very complicated picture, talking about China's poverty issue. Regarding North Korea, I don't think China can do much to North Korea poverty issue. And the North Korean regime has been very independent. And China's relationship with North Korea is a very complicated, it's kind of catch-22. Damn, you do it. Damn, you don't do it. That's kind of a relationship, I see it. After the pandemic, North Korea completely shut off. The first country to shut off its border with China. And last year, the cross-border trade was zero between North Korea and China. Americans will be surprised, but that's the reality between North Korea and China. So I don't know how much China could do to help North Korea to lift its poverty. I don't know if North Korea wants China to help, because North Korea did not want to be a junior partner in this relationship. It's kind of very equal partnership.
All right, the next question is a long one. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. In view of the A, aggressive and questionable building of new islands and military outposts in the South Pacific Ocean and intimidating its neighbors in that region, and B, its prisons housing perhaps millions of Uyghurs and other Muslims in Western China, and C, the powerful expansion of China's Belt and Road Initiative, and D, Jinping's establishing a strong man long-term rule over China, doesn't the US and other liberal democracies have very good reason to be wary and distrustful of China's goals, activities, and words?
Of course, should be worried. But so the issue here is that if you worried, what you can do, or what you should do in this case. And the island reclamation in the South China Sea has been going on since 2013. Xi Jinping came to office second year. And the Xinjiang issue is much more complicated than the kind of black and white picture. And authoritarianism, Chinese people support that. They want a strong leader. I mean, Joe Biden just in that last week NBC interview, they asked that question to him. I think he understands a lot better than many Americans. That is, China was humiliated by foreign powers for a century. And China wants to have a strong leader to lead them. And sometimes they can sacrifice for their freedom. Like during the pandemic, they laughed at Americans. You want to fight freedom, have freedom, but your knives are not there. And so for all these issues you raised are valid issues, but they are much more complicated than the black and white picture. And also in the world, democracy, talking about democracy is in big trouble today. That's my really concern. I came to the United States 37 years ago, had those kind of idealistic, admire the bacon on the hill. But now we see January 6th, we see Trump, we see 7.74 million voters still believe in the conspiracy theory here. All those kind of problems in this country, in other countries. So it's much more complicated. So a lot of people in this country said that the competition between Chinese authoritarianism and American liberal democracy will determine the future of the world. Indeed. But who is going to win? I don't know. I've become less optimistic now. In DU here, I saw those liberal, those kind of, I'm so disappointed about a lot of things in DU in this country, I think, last several years. So maybe I did not answer your question right, but I'm really, really somehow having some mixed feelings here.
I do have a couple more questions, and I know we're going a little long. If you're able to stay with us.
Sure, I will be happy to do whatever.
And so for those that can stay on the line too, we just have a couple really good questions queued up. So the next one is, when it comes to US domestic security, how concerned should the US be of Chinese technology, such as TikTok and Huawei, etc.?
And this is much more complicated also than a simple issue, because the US has talked about technology decoupling from China, meaning that the US has more advanced technology. Indeed, US has not more advanced technology, but China has developed, catched up very quickly in the 5G, in AI, in Qualcomm, another technology. I mean, just read the recent report by the Google former CEO, Schmidt, talking about China's AI development, because they have big data, 1.4 million people without privacy concern. They can collect all the data to very quickly develop those technologies. And the US has still cutting edge, but it's much more complicated. And also talking about TikTok, those things, I think it's more political than technological. And this, for me, US is more like China in this case. China did these things to cut off falling so-called infiltration. The US is following China's steps now. This is not America, what I came, when I came to, very confident. And for many years, China was not confident. China was so afraid of Americans to have a peaceful evolution to change the China regime. Now US is so inconfident. This is something I found so ironical.
Is China a natural ally of Russia?
Yes, because they shared grievance against the US on many fronts, geopolitically, ideologically, everything. And the US is pushing these two countries together. US played the strategic triangle very well during the Cold War, but US forgets now. You have to get good relationship with both, let them to fight. Now US fighting both fronts. This is stupid, very stupid strategy to put these two strange bad fellows together. They have so many problems among themselves, between themselves. But when they faced US, they found shared interests and they support each other against America now. So this geostrategic landscape of the world is not good for America.
All right, a similar question to one earlier. Genocide against the Uyghurs is not a universally accepted value. How does the Chinese government explain this behavior in terms of universally accepted values?
What is the universal of accepted values? 天下, no. Can you repeat the first sentence?
Yes, genocide against the Uyghurs is.
Oh,
yeah.
Genocide is a term used by UN. There's a very clear definition there. I would say China in Xinjiang has a lot of problems there. I would not use genocide, that term. Because you see, you watch those videos, I watched them, I read them carefully. A lot of them are not real. Group rapes, all those things killed in group, those are not true. There are not problems, not problems. I researched those minority problems, ethnic problems in China and tried to criticize China. However, the West very often has somehow distorted picture over there. Maybe I said that's politically incorrect. Just like in many problems in this country, political correctness has damaging American reputation in the world and also hurt American interests itself. So for China, using this term genocide, which has a very clear definition from UN convention, and I found it's some little bit troubling to me.
So I have two more questions and I'm going to try and push through them. And so I appreciate that you're staying longer and I appreciate that folks are staying on the line. Two more questions. One, is the concept of Chinese exceptionalism harbored by its current political leadership? And if so, how is this manifested?
So many, just like American exceptionalism. China just follows American footsteps. That's what I told China, that here, when you say how to manifest most of the China model here is China, Xi Jinping himself said is if the shoes are fit or not, only those wearers can tell. They don't want other people, other countries tell China how they should behave, how they should do. They thought China has a long history, civilization, and also now become developed within a so-called one-party system, which they think Chinese people support that. In fact, I'm amazed. My colleagues, all those Chinese colleagues educated in Berkeley, in Harvard, when they went back to China, they criticized me too liberal, too Americanized, don't understand China. So that's kind of Chinese exceptionalism here. But I criticize them. No, there are some universal values here they have to accept. But this is the issue, much more subject to debate.
Okay, last question. Assuming the global supply chain for the US has made China the manufacturer and the US the consumer innovator, can we build official cooperation on this basis?
Of course. The supply chains has been disrupted because of the Trump trade war, and also now the COVID. And but the global division of labor, the comparative advantage, the classical liberal economics, all those kind of principles are still valid in this case. But there are some kind of a distortion here because of, as I said today, I read President Biden's review order, those things for national security concern, all those things, and also the adjustment in terms of the labor market, everything like that. However, I think collaboration between China and US in those shared interests, of course, we have so many conflict of interests, is still possible, especially other than those kind of supply chain issue, the global issues, the pandemic, the climate change, the cross-nation crimes, and weapons of mass destruction, all those issues. These two big powers, two largest powers, have responsibilities to work together. Otherwise, the world, as I said earlier, will be disorder, will be jungle of Chinese said forest. The might makes right, which is not right. That's a problem here.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Zhao. What an insightful, reflective kind of discussion. Great questions, and we appreciate your candid responses. In honor of your speaking with us today, our club will make a donation to Polio Plus. It is Rotary's goal to eradicate polio around the world. So in your honor, 33 children will be inoculated against polio. And with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation 2-to-1 match, that means actually 100 children will be inoculated.
Thank you, I'm so honored.
Thank you very much. We are equally honored.
Okay,
Next
thank
week's
you.
meeting on Thursday, February 25th at noon will again be online. The topic will be the growing U.S.-Brazil partnership. What does it mean for Colorado? And our speaker will be Ambassador Todd C. Chapman, U.S. Ambassador to Brazil. Also a reminder, if you can join the membership meeting right after this call, it starts at 1:15. Reach out to Chad Tyler or myself and we'll get you the link. Please join me in reciting the Rotary four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill
and better friendship?
And will it be beneficial to all concerned?
All concerned.
Thank you for joining me today. We are adjourned.